I sent my family one invitation, the kind most teachers never see in their whole lives. My dad laughed in the group chat and typed that he was not flying for some little teacher award. 48 hours later, he was midway through a fancy dinner when his phone lit up, and his face turned the color of paper, because the woman on national TV was me, and that little award came with a secret my grandmother had been saving for years. My name is Peyton Hughes. I am 33 years old, and for the last decade, I have defined myself by the borders of a singular, small world. It is a world made of cinder block walls painted a sterile cream, the smell of floor wax and old paper, and the relentless, high-pitched energy of 7th and 8th graders at Ridgeview Valley Middle School. I am an English teacher. To me, that title has always felt heavy with responsibility and rich with meaning. It means I am the one who introduces a 12-year-old to the concept of empathy through fiction. It means I am the one who notices when a child stops eating lunch or starts wearing long sleeves in the middle of July. But tonight, as I stood in the wings of a massive stage in Washington, D.C., the phantom sensation of chalk dust still clung to my fingertips. It was a nervous tic, a psychosomatic memory of the classroom I had left behind only 48 hours ago. I rubbed my thumb against my index finger, expecting to feel the dry, powdery residue of a day spent explaining the structure of a persuasive essay. Instead, I felt the smooth, cold silk of a dress that cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. I looked down at my phone one last time. The screen was the only source of light in the shadowed alcove where I was waiting. The group chat was open. The messages were still there, glowing with a toxic permanence. They had not changed in the 2 days since I sent the invitation. They sat there like a digital bruise that refused to fade. There was the PDF I had sent. Formal, proud. The National Teacher of the Year Selection Committee invites you, and right below it, the response from my father, Grant Hughes. Just a lowly teacher award. I'm not flying for that nonsense. I stared at the word lowly. It was such a specific choice. He could have said small. He could have said unimportant. But lowly implied position. It implied a hierarchy where he was at the summit, breathing the rare air of corporate dominance. And I was somewhere in the mud, scraping by with people he deemed irrelevant. It was a word designed to put me back in my box. I closed my eyes and, for a moment, the sounds of the stage crew prepping the cameras faded away. In the silence of my own head, I could see him. I did not need to be there to know exactly what was happening in Cleveland right now. The image was as clear as a scene from a movie I had watched 1,000 times. Grant Hughes would be sitting in one of those high-backed leather chairs at the Chop House downtown, the one with the mahogany paneling and the waiters who knew not to speak unless spoken to. He would be holding a glass of Cabernet, the kind that cost $40 a pour. He would be swirling it, watching the crimson legs run down the side of the crystal, a look of self-satisfied boredom on his face. "My daughter," he would say to whatever associate or client he was trying to impress, waving a hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, Peyton, she is well. She is teaching. It is cute, I suppose. Not exactly high stakes, is it? Not like what we do." He would laugh then, a dry, sharp sound that signaled to everyone at the table that the subject was closed. He would cut into a steak that cost more than the grants I had to beg for to buy new copies of To Kill a Mockingbird. He would talk about real success. He would talk about margins and acquisitions and the power of leverage. He would check his watch, not because he had somewhere to be, but because time was money, and he liked to remind people that his was expensive. He would be completely, utterly unaware that the ground beneath his feet had already shifted. He would be drinking his wine, thinking he was the protagonist of the family story, the sun around which we all orbited. He had no idea that the lowly daughter he had dismissed was currently standing 300 miles away, about to step into a spotlight bright enough to blind him. 2 minutes to air. 2 minutes. The stage manager's voice cut through my visualization, snapping me back to the present. The reality of where I was crashed in on me. This was not the fluorescent-lit hallway of Ridgeview Valley. This was the backstage of the NNC National Live Broadcast Center. The energy here was electric, a physical force that hummed in the air. Men and women in black headsets were sprinting past me with clipboards, whispering urgent commands into microphones. Massive boom cameras were swinging into position out on the stage, their lenses like giant, unblinking eyes. Through the gap in the heavy velvet curtains, I could hear the murmur of the audience. It wasn't the restless shuffling of a middle school assembly. It was the low, polite rumble of power. Senators, philanthropists, CEOs of tech giants, people who ran the country, and they were waiting for us. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. I do not need them, I whispered to myself. I said it out loud, testing the weight of the words. I do not need them to be here. But the truth is a stubborn thing. As much as I wanted to be the stoic, independent heroine who had outgrown her need for parental validation, the little girl inside me was still standing by the door, waiting for her dad to show up. There is a specific kind of hollowness that comes from scanning a crowd and realizing that the people who share your DNA could not be bothered to witness the biggest moment of your life. I had hoped, even after the text, even after the silence from my mother and the mockery from my sister, Mallory, I had foolishly, desperately hoped that maybe, just maybe, one of them would surprise me. I checked my phone again. Nothing. No good luck. No. We are watching. Just the silence. Suddenly, a text bubble popped up at the top of my screen. It was not from my family. It was from a number I did not have saved, but the context made it clear immediately. Ms. Hughes, this is Sarah, producer for NNC. We have a 30-second slot open before the main intro. Can we get a quick soundbite from you on what this night means? You are the story everyone is whispering about. I stared at the message. The story everyone is whispering about. My hand went to the pocket of my blazer, or it would have, if I were wearing my teacher clothes. Instead, I reached for the small clutch I was holding. Inside, resting against my lipstick and my hotel keycard, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was heavy, heavier than paper had any right to be. The return address was embossed in gold, and there was a federal seal stamped on the back. I had carried it with me every second since I left the hotel. It was the little award my father had laughed at, but he did not know what was inside. He did not know that this envelope contained a secret that my grandmother, Dr. Evelyn Hart, had been curating for decades. I thought about my dad in that restaurant. I thought about the way he used his wealth as a weapon. A way to make everyone around him feel small so he could feel big. He thought I was safe to ignore because I was a teacher, in his world. Teachers were service workers. We were the people who babysat the children of the wealthy until they were old enough to take over the empire. We were invisible. He had no idea that invisibility is a superpower. When people think you are nothing, they say things in front of you that they shouldn't. They leave doors unlocked. They forget that you are watching. And I had been watching. For 33 years, I had been the quiet one, the observer, the one taking notes while they toasted to their own greatness. The stage manager looked at me, holding up one finger. 1 minute, Ms. Hughes, you are up first. I looked at the producer's text again. Then I looked at the dark screen where my family's silence lived. A cold, calm clarity washed over me. It was not anger. Anger is hot and messy and makes you stutter. This was something else. This was the feeling of a teacher who has finally decided that the lesson plan needs to change. If they want to see my value, I whispered, the words vibrating in my throat, then tonight they will see it. I was not doing this to hurt them. I was not doing this to destroy the family reputation or humiliate my father on national television. That was not my nature. I taught children how to write poetry. I did not teach them how to wage war. But there is a difference between vengeance and the truth. They had spent a lifetime telling me who I was. Lowly, little, just a teacher. Tonight, I was going to hold up a mirror. The lights were about to come on, and for the first time in history, the Hughes family was going to see exactly who they were, reflected in the brilliance of the daughter they left behind. I typed a reply to the producer, "I am ready." 30 seconds, the stage manager hissed. I straightened my spine. I smoothed the silk of my dress. I thought of my grandmother, Evelyn, somewhere out there in the dark, holding the other half of the key. The curtain began to rise. The hum of the audience swelled into applause. I stepped forward, out of the shadows, and into the blinding white heat of the spotlight. 3 weeks before I stood on that stage in Washington, life was much smaller, quieter, and infinitely more predictable. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October, the kind of day where the autumn light slanted through the high windows of room B112 and turned the floating dust motes into suspended gold. The final bell had rung an hour ago. The chaotic symphony of slamming lockers and shrieking 13-year-olds had faded into the heavy, settling silence that only empty schools possess. I was standing at the whiteboard with a spray bottle and a microfiber cloth, erasing the remnants of a lesson on foreshadowing in The Giver. My arm moved in wide, rhythmic circles, wiping away definitions and diagrams, but my mind was elsewhere. I paused for a moment, letting my hand rest on the cool porcelain surface. To my right, the corkboard wall was a chaotic collage of color. It was my favorite part of the room. It was covered in sticky notes, torn notebook paper, and handmade cards from students I had taught over the last 8 years. Thank you for not giving up on me when I failed that test. One read in messy blue ink, "Ms. Hughes, you are the first person who told me my writing was good." Said another, this was my currency. In the economy of the Hughes family, where value was measured in billable hours and stock options, these scraps of paper were worthless. But to me, they were receipts of a life well spent. They were proof that I existed and that my existence mattered. I touched the edge of a faded yellow note from a student named Marcus who had graduated 3 years ago. I needed that tactile reminder today because the crushing weight of being a Hughes was heavier than usual. My phone buzzed on the teacher's desk, vibrating against the stack of grading I still needed to tackle. I looked at the screen. "Mom." I stared at the name for a full 5 seconds. There is a specific kind of fatigue that hits you when a certain family member calls. It is not physical tiredness. It is a spiritual exhaustion, a preemptive bracing for impact. I took a breath, put on my best daughter voice, and swiped green. "Hi, Mom," I said, cradling the phone between my shoulder and ear so I could organize the papers. "Everything okay?" "Oh, Peyton, you will not believe the news," Linda Hughes said. There was no greeting, no inquiry about my day, no question about whether I was busy. There was only the breathless urgency of a press agent delivering a headline. "Mallory just landed the Henderson merger. The partners are talking about putting her name on the door before she turns 35. Can you imagine?" I stopped shuffling the papers. I looked out the window at the empty football field. "That is great. Mom, really. Tell her I said congratulations." "We are going out to celebrate tonight," she continued, steamrolling over my response. "Your father booked the private room at Le Jardin. You should come, although—" She paused, and the tone shifted from excitement to a vague, polite dismissal. "I know it is a school night. You probably have papers to grade or whatever it is you do in the evenings, and it is going to be a lot of legal talk. You might be bored." It was a masterclass in exclusion disguised as consideration. "I do have a lot of grading," I said, my voice steady. "But thanks for the invite." "Okay, well, we will send pictures," she chirped. "Oh, and Peyton, try to get some rest. You sounded tired in your voicemail last week. You know how you get when you are overworked." The line went dead before I could reply. I lowered the phone and looked at the black screen. Whatever it is you do, that phrase hung in the empty classroom like a bad smell. It was not malicious, not exactly. My mother did not hate me. She just did not understand me. To Linda and Grant Hughes, I was a genetic anomaly. I was the bird that refused to fly, the investment that failed to yield a return. They loved me with the distant, puzzled affection one might feel for a slow-witted pet. I sat down in my desk chair. the leather creaking in the silence. This was not new. This was the texture of my life. The memory of the phone call acted like a key, unlocking a vault of similar moments I kept suppressed to survive. I closed my eyes and I was 26 years old again. It was the day of my master's degree graduation. I had worked 2 jobs to pay for the tuition because I refused to take money from my father and listen to his lectures about return on investment. I was graduating with honors. I stood in the humid gymnasium, scanning the bleachers, clutching my diploma so hard the corners bent. When I finally spotted them, the ceremony was halfway over. My father was checking his email on his BlackBerry. My mother was fanning herself with a program, looking around with an expression of mild distaste, as if she were afraid she might catch poverty from the air. They stayed for exactly 20 minutes. When I found them afterward, my father tapped his watch. "Good show, Peyton," he had said, already turning toward the parking lot. "Look, we have to beat the traffic. I have a conference call with Tokyo at 6. We will do dinner next week." "All right." They left me standing there in my gown, surrounded by families who were hugging and crying and taking photos. I went to a diner alone, ordered pancakes, and told the waitress it was my graduation so she would give me an extra side of bacon. The memory shifted. I was 30. My 30th birthday, a milestone. I had spent the day waiting, just waiting. I taught my classes. I checked my phone between every period. Nothing. No calls. No texts. By 8 o'clock that night, I was sitting on my couch with a glass of cheap wine and a store-bought cupcake, watching a reality show. 3 days later, a text from my mother popped up. "Happy belated Crazy Week with the charity gala. Hope you did something fun. Dad says hi." It was the "Dad says hi" that hurt the most. It meant he had not even bothered to pick up his own phone. I was an afterthought, a calendar notification they had swiped away because they were too busy being important. Then came last Christmas. The memory was sharper, more recent. We were in the living room of the family estate. The tree was 12 feet tall, decorated by a professional designer. My father had opened a bottle of vintage scotch, the kind that cost 4 figures. He was pouring a glass for Trevor, Mallory's husband, and beaming. "To the new vice president of litigation," he had toasted, raising his glass to Mallory. She looked radiant, sharp, and expensive. $50,000 bonus. That is my girl. That is how you play the game. I had been holding a cup of hot cider, feeling small, but I had tried. I had wanted so badly to be part of the circle. "I had a win this year too," I had said, my voice sounding thin in the cavernous room. My 7th graders organized a readathon. We raised $1,200 to replace the water-damaged books in the library. The district wouldn't fund it, so the kids did it themselves. The silence that followed was excruciating. My father looked at me, blinking slowly, as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. $1,200, he repeated, not a question, a statement of insignificance. "Well, that is nice. Peyton, good for them." Then he turned back to Mallory. "So, about the bonus structure. Are you putting it into the portfolio or buying that property in the Hamptons? I learned the lesson then. I learned it in my bones. Do not expect them to care. Do not bring your small triumphs to their big table. They will only starve you." I opened my eyes, bringing myself back to room B112. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the rows of empty desks. I was not 26. I was not 30. I was 33, and I was done waiting for them to applaud. I stood up to pack my bag. I needed to get out of there. I needed to go home, make a grilled cheese sandwich, and forget about the dinner at Le Jardin. I walked to the faculty mailboxes in the main office on my way out. Usually, my slot was filled with flyers for textbook seminars or passive-aggressive notes from parents about why their child deserved an A instead of a B-. But today, there was only one thing in the metal cubby. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It looked out of place against the gray steel of the mail slot. It looked heavy. I pulled it out. The paper felt like fabric, rich and textured under my thumb. My name was typed in a font that looked like actual calligraphy. Peyton Hughes, Ridgeview Valley Middle School, and below that, the return address, National Teacher of the Year Selection Committee, Washington, D.C. My breath hitched in my throat. The hallway was empty, the janitor's buffer humming somewhere in the distance, but the world suddenly felt very loud. I stared at the seal on the back. It was real. This was not a flyer. With trembling fingers, I slid my nail under the flap and tore it open. I pulled out a single sheet of heavy stationery. Dear Ms. Hughes, it is our distinct honor to inform you that you have been selected as one of the 5 national finalists for the Teacher of the Year award. I leaned against the wall because my knees suddenly felt like water. I read the line again. Finalist, national, me, the lowly teacher. I continued reading, my eyes scanning the paragraphs about the ceremony, the broadcast, the recognition. But then, near the bottom, a sentence stopped me cold. Your nomination file was one of the most compelling we have reviewed in a decade. You were nominated by a renowned educator whose identity, per their request, will remain anonymous until the night of the ceremony. I lowered the letter. A renowned educator, I thought of my principal. Mr. Henderson. He was a good man, but he was tired. He did not have the kind of pull that got the attention of a national committee. I thought of my department head. She was currently on maternity leave. Who had been watching me closely enough to write a file that the committee called compelling? Who had seen the late nights, the skipped lunches, the way I bought winter coats for students out of my own paycheck and pretended they came from the lost and found? My father saw a failure. My mother saw a disappointment. My sister saw a joke. But someone powerful, someone renowned, had looked at my life and seen something worth honoring. I stood there in the quiet office, clutching that letter to my chest. Tears prickled behind my eyes, hot and fast. I was not crying because I might win an award. I was not crying because I might be on television. I was crying because for the first time in 33 years, the crushing invisibility was gone. I felt solid. I felt real. The phone in my pocket buzzed again. Another text from the family group chat, probably a photo of the appetizers at Le Jardin. I did not look at it. I did not care about their appetizers. I did not care about the merger. I looked at the letter in my hand. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. Okay. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I treated it with the reverence one might show a religious artifact. I walked out of the school and into the cool October evening air. The wind bit at my cheeks, but I did not feel the cold. I felt a strange, terrifying heat rising in my chest. It was the heat of a fire that had been smoldering for decades. Finally catching a draft. I did not know who had nominated me, but I knew one thing: I was going to Washington, and I was not going to ask for my family's permission. I was done asking. The cursor on my phone screen blinked at me. It was a rhythmic, mocking pulse that seemed to keep time with the anxious thudding of my heart. I was sitting on the edge of my beige sofa, my legs tucked under me, surrounded by the silence of my apartment. The television was on, muted, casting a flickering blue light across the room, but I was not watching it. My entire universe had shrunk down to the 3 inches of glass in my hand. I had rewritten the message 10 times. The first draft had been too eager. Hey everyone, I have some incredible news. I made it to the finals. Please say you can come. I deleted it immediately. It sounded desperate. It sounded like the 7-year-old version of me tugging on my father's expensive suit jacket, begging him to look at a drawing I had made. I was 33 years old. I would not beg. The second draft was too apologetic. Sorry to bother you guys. I know you are super busy with work, but I got this invitation. I backspaced through that one with a vengeance. Why was I apologizing for an achievement? Why was I preemptively making myself small so they would not have to bother shrinking me? The third, fourth, and fifth drafts were variations on a theme of insecurity. I tried to make it sound casual. I tried to make it sound businesslike. I tried to find the perfect alchemy of words that would force them to take me seriously without triggering their instinct to dismiss me. It was an impossible tightrope to walk. Finally, I stopped typing. I took a deep breath and looked at the digital PDF I had attached. The file name was clean and official, national_teacher_of_the_year_finalist_, packet. PDF. The preview showed the gold seal and the formal header. The document itself carried more weight than any words I could type. It was the shield I would hide behind. I typed one final version. It was surgical. It was factual. It left no room for emotion that they could exploit. Attached is the formal invitation for the National Teacher of the Year Awards ceremony in Washington. D.C. I have been selected as one of 5 finalists. The event is on the 18th. Travel and accommodation are covered for family. It will be broadcast live on NNC. I stared at the send button. It was a small blue arrow, innocent in design but terrifying in implication. Once I pressed it, the clock would start. Once I pressed it, I would know. I would know if this massive, life-altering validation was finally enough to make them look up from their own lives. My thumb hovered. I felt a wave of nausea, the physical manifestation of a lifetime of conditioning. Do not make noise. Do not ask for things. Do not be a burden. I closed my eyes and pressed the glass. Sent. The message bubble swooshed onto the screen, joining the history of the Hughes family group chat. It sat there, stark and white against the gray background, right below a link Mallory had sent 2 days ago about a vineyard she was thinking of buying. I immediately locked the phone and threw it onto the cushion beside me as if it were a live grenade. "Okay," I said aloud to the empty room. "It is done." I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I needed to do something with my hands. I needed to pretend that I was a normal person having a normal evening, not a woman paralyzed by the need for parental approval. I filled a pot with water and set it on the stove. I got out my grading pen and a stack of essays on the outsiders. I was going to make pasta. I was going to grade. I was going to exist. I chopped an onion. I did not need an onion. But the mechanical action of the knife hitting the cutting board was grounding. Chop, chop, chop. 5 minutes passed. I looked at the phone on the sofa. The screen was dark. 10 minutes passed. The water began to boil. I threw in the pasta. 15 minutes. I could not help it. I walked back to the sofa and picked up the phone. I unlocked it. Seen by Mom. Seen by Dad. Seen by Mallory. The air left my lungs. They had seen it. All of them. They were looking at their phones. Or they had looked and put them away. They had read the words, National Teacher of the Year. They had seen the PDF, and they were typing nothing. I stood there in the middle of my living room, the phone in my hand, waiting for the 3 little dots that indicate someone is writing a reply. I waited for the gray bubble to appear. I waited for anything. Nothing but the white glare of the screen. I went back to the kitchen. I drained the pasta. I stirred in the sauce. I ate standing up at the counter, the fork scraping against the ceramic bowl. The food tasted like cardboard. Every 30 seconds, I tapped the screen to keep it from going dark. Scene, scene, scene. The silence was not empty. It was heavy. It was a presence in the room. It was the sound of a door being gently, firmly closed in my face. I sat down to grade the essays. I tried to focus on a student's analysis of Ponyboy Curtis. But the words swam before my eyes. I kept checking the timestamps. It had been an hour, 2 hours. By 10 o'clock, the silence had shifted from anxiety to a dull, aching bruise. They were not going to reply tonight. They were making a point. In the Hughes family. Silence was a weapon. It was how they established dominance. By not replying, they were telling me that my news was not urgent. It did not warrant an interruption of their evening. It could wait. I could wait. I turned off the lights and went to the bedroom. I plugged my phone into the charger on the nightstand. Usually, I put it face down to sleep. Tonight, I left it face up. I lay in the dark, watching the ceiling fans slice through the shadows. I told myself to sleep. I told myself that they were just busy. Maybe they were discussing it. Maybe they were looking at flights. Maybe they were planning a surprise. The lies we tell ourselves in the dark are the most pathetic ones. I drifted into a restless sleep, my hand resting near the phone. my subconscious tethered to the device, waiting for a vibration that never came. Morning arrived with the gray, flat light of November. I woke up with a start, my heart hammering before I was even fully conscious. I grabbed the phone, no notifications. I sat up, pulling the duvet around me. It was 7:15. My father would be up. He was an early riser. He checked the markets at 6. He answered emails at 6:30. He had seen the message last night. He had had 12 hours to process it. I opened the group chat, and then I saw it, at the bottom of the screen. The 3 gray dots appeared. Dad is typing, my breath caught. I stared at the animation, the little wave of the dots rising and falling. He was writing. He was saying something. Then, the dots disappeared. I waited. Had he changed his mind? Was he correcting a typo? Dad is typing. The dots returned. He was writing a long message, or maybe he was struggling to find the words to express how proud he was. Maybe he was checking his calendar to give me exact dates. The dots vanished again. This went on for 3 minutes. It was a subtle, psychological torture. I could imagine him sitting at his glass-top desk, sipping his espresso, typing out a sentence, looking at it, and deciding it gave me too much credit. Delete, rewrite, delete, finally. The message bubble popped onto the screen. It was short. It was not a paragraph. It was 2 sentences. Just a lowly teacher award. I am not flying for that nonsense. I stared at the words. I read them once. I read them twice. I read them until they blurred. Lowly? Nonsense. He did not say, I cannot make it. He did not say, congratulations, but I am busy. He attacked the premise of the achievement itself. He stripped it of value before I could even try to wear it. He called it nonsense, the national recognition, the career-defining honor, the culmination of a decade of work nonsense. Before I could even process the sting, another bubble appeared. This one was from Mallory. She must have been watching the chat, waiting for Dad to set the tone so she could follow his lead. Totally agree. She wrote, I have dinner plans that weekend anyway. The partners are taking us to the vault. And then, she added an emoji. It was the crying, laughing face, the yellow circle with tears streaming from its eyes. Leaning to the side in hysterical amusement, she was laughing. She was laughing at the idea that she would cancel a dinner to watch me receive an award. She was laughing at the idea that my event was on the same level as her dinner. I looked at the third name in the chat, Mom. She was online. The green dot next to her name was active. She was reading this. She was watching her husband call her daughter's career nonsense. She was watching her other daughter laugh at her sister's invitation. I waited for her to type. I waited for the mother in her to wake up. I waited for her to say, Grant, that is harsh. Or Mallory, be nice. I waited for her to say, I will come. Peyton, but she did not type. Instead, a small icon appeared next to Mallory's message. Mom liked, totally agree. I have dinner plans that weekend anyway. A thumbs up, a digital nod of approval. She was not just passive. She was participating. She was signaling to the tribe that she stood with the winners. And I was not one of them. I sat there in the cold morning light, the phone feeling heavy and dead in my hand. The tears I expected did not come. The sobbing I was afraid of did not happen. Instead, I felt a strange, cold sensation in the center of my chest. It felt like water turning into ice. It felt like concrete setting. For years, I had been soft. I had been pliable. I had absorbed their blows and tried to reshape myself to fit their mold. I had thought that if I just explained myself better, if I just achieved more, if I just loved them harder, they would finally see me. But they did see me. That was the revelation. They saw me clearly. They saw me as lowly. They saw me as nonsense. They saw me as a punchline, and they liked it that way. The hope that I had slept with the night before evaporated. It did not leave a void. It left a clean, hard surface. I looked at the keypad. I needed to reply. If I did not reply, they would think I was pouting. They would think they had hurt me, and I would not give them the satisfaction of knowing they had drawn blood. I needed to match their energy. I needed to be as cool and detached as the glass screen I was touching. I typed slowly, my fingers steady. That is fine. No worries. I hit send. I did not add an explanation. I did not say, maybe next time. I did not add a sad emoji. I put the phone down on the nightstand. That is fine. It was a lie. And it was the truth. It was fine because I was finally done. I was finished with the begging. I was finished with the waiting. I got out of bed and walked to the bathroom mirror. I looked at my own reflection. I looked tired. Yes. But there was something else in my eyes. The pleading look was gone. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face. No worries, I whispered to the mirror. A vow formed in the silence of the bathroom. It was not a vow of revenge, not in the way a villain makes a vow. It was a vow of reality. I would go to Washington. I would stand on that stage, and I would shine so bright that the shadow they cast over me would be burned away forever. I went back to the bedroom and picked up the phone. I did not check the chat again. I opened my email and found the thread with the NNC producer. I typed a new message to Sarah. The producer, confirmed, I will be there, and I'm ready to tell the whole story. I hit send on that email, and for the first time in my life, I did not care what my father would think about it. The bridge was burned, and the fire was lighting my way forward. 2 days before I was scheduled to board a plane for Washington, my phone rang again. It was my mother. Her voice was high and tight, pitched in that specific frequency she reserved for what she considered social obligations. She invited me to dinner. She called it a casual family catch-up, but I knew better. In the Hughes family, there was no such thing as a casual dinner. Every meal was a performance, and every invitation had a subtext. She told me to be there at 7 o'clock sharp. She said it was important that we all be together. She did not mention my award. She did not mention the text messages I had sent. She acted as if the last 48 hours of silence had never happened, as if the air between us was not thick with unsaid insults. I almost said no. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stay in my apartment, pack my suitcase, and protect the fragile peace I had built since the group chat incident. But I needed to see them. I needed to look them in the eye one last time before I stepped onto that stage. I needed to confirm, with physical evidence, that I was making the right choice by leaving them behind emotionally. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house at 6:55. The house was a sprawling brick fortress in Shaker Heights, manicured to within an inch of its life. The windows glowed with a warm, golden light that promised domestic bliss, a lie constructed of expensive lamps and custom drapery. When I walked into the dining room, the trap was immediately obvious. The table was set with the Royal Doulton china. These were plates rimmed in platinum, delicate and translucently thin. We were not allowed to touch them growing up. They were reserved for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, or for the nights when my father closed a deal worth 7 figures. They were never used for a middle school teacher. Peyton. You made it, my mother chirped, breezing past me with a platter of rosemary-crusted lamb. She offered me a cheek to kiss, but did not make eye contact. Sit down. We are just waiting for the wine to breathe. I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, the spot with the slightly wobbly chair leg that nobody ever bothered to fix. Opposite me sat Mallory and her husband, Trevor. Mallory was glowing. She was wearing a dress that likely cost more than my car, and she had the predatory, satisfied look of a cat that had just eaten a particularly expensive canary. Trevor looked tired. He gave me a small, tight nod, his eyes darting to his wife as if asking for permission to acknowledge my existence. My father entered last. He carried a decanter of red wine like a scepter. He poured a glass for everyone, filling mine last, and with noticeably less liquid than the others. To the news of the night, Grant said, raising his glass. He did not look at me. He looked directly at Mallory. I stiffened. Here it was. To my brilliant daughter, he continued, his voice booming with a pride that filled the room. Mallory just secured the lead counsel position for the biotech merger. A junior partner at 31. That is unheard of. That is history. It is a big deal. Daddy, Mallory said, feigning modesty but preening under the praise. The buy-in is significant, but the equity package is going to set us up for life. That is what I am talking about, Grant said, taking a heavy sip of wine. Equity, ownership, real power, not just pushing paper, but moving the needle. He looked around the table, his gaze sliding over me as if I were a piece of furniture. I am proud of you. Mal, you are building a legacy. You are showing the world what this family is made of. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap. The platinum-rimmed plate in front of me was empty, but my stomach felt full of stones. The casual dinner was a coronation for Mallory. It was a calculated display to remind me of the hierarchy. Congratulations, Mallory, I said. My voice was steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. That is a huge achievement. Thanks, P, she said, cutting into her lamb. She didn't look up. It is going to be insane hours, though I barely have time to breathe as it is. Hard work pays off, my mother said, beaming. We always knew you were destined for the top, honey. I took a sip of water. I decided to test the waters. I decided to see if there was any room at this table for me. I actually have a busy week coming up too, I said. I tried to keep my tone light, conversational. I leave for DC in 2 days for the ceremony. The schedule they sent is pretty intense. The sound of silverware scraping against china was the only response. My father chewed his meat slowly. He swallowed, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, and let out a short, dismissive breath. Peyton, he said, his tone tired, as if he were explaining tax law to a toddler. Let's not spoil Mallory's night with that. We are celebrating a career milestone here, a real one. It is a career milestone, I said, a little sharper than I intended. I was selected from thousands of teachers, Mallory laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound, like breaking glass. Oh, come on. Peyton, she said, waving her fork at me. It is a participation trophy. It is cute, but let's be real. What does a Teacher of the Year award get you? A plaque, a $50 gift card to a bookstore? She took a sip of wine, her eyes glittering with malice. I mean, seriously, what is your salary these days? 40,045. It is 52, I said quietly. 52, she repeated, tasting the number like it was sour milk. She turned to Trevor. Babe, what was my signing bonus this quarter alone? Just the bonus. Trevor looked down at his plate. He looked uncomfortable. Mal, don't. Tell her, she insisted, her voice hardening. It was 18,000, Trevor mumbled. 18,000 in a month, Mallory said, turning back to me with a triumphant smile. I make your annual salary in 3 months. So, please, let's not pretend our busy weeks are the same. I am securing the future. You are well. You are babysitting. The insult hung in the air. I looked at my mother. I looked for the defense that should have been there. Linda Hughes placed her hand on the table. She looked at me with wide, sad eyes. It was an expression of pity that cut deeper than Mallory's aggression. Peyton, honey, she said softly. Mallory is just being practical. You know we love you, but sometimes I just wonder why you do it to yourself. Do what? I asked. This, she said, gesturing vaguely at me. You were always so smart. You had such high test scores. You could have gone to law school like your sister. You could have been in marketing. Why did you choose to get stuck in a classroom with other people's children? It just seems so beneath you. There it was, the core truth of my family. They did not hate my job because it was hard. They hated it because they thought it was for servants. They thought that caring for others was a job for people who could not afford to pay someone else to do it. I looked at the three of them. My father, the king of his castle, my sister, the heir apparent, my mother, the enforcer of the status quo. They were eating lamb on expensive china, completely convinced of their own superiority. I felt a sudden, strange calm. It was the calm of a soldier who realizes the enemy is not across the battlefield. but sitting across the dinner table. I teach because it matters, I said, because I shape the minds that will eventually work at your companies, because I save kids who don't have anyone else. Save them, Grant scoffed. Please, you are not a doctor. Peyton, you teach grammar. I looked at Trevor. He had not touched his wine. He was staring at me from across the table. For the first time all night, he looked up and locked eyes with me. While Mallory was busy pouring herself more wine and my father was laughing at his own joke, Trevor leaned forward slightly. You are doing a good thing. Peyton, he said. His voice was barely a whisper, pitched low so only I could hear. I looked at him, surprised. My algebra teacher, he said, his eyes intense and sad. Mr. Collins, I was failing. My dad was rough. Mr. Collins stayed late every Tuesday for a year. He is the only reason I got into college. He is the reason I am not in jail. He glanced nervously at Mallory, then back to me. They don't get it, but you are doing the real work. It was a crumb, a tiny secret crumb of validation, but in that starving room, it felt like a feast. I gave him a small nod. Thank you. I looked back at my father. He was waiting for me to apologize, or to fade away, or to admit that I was less than them. I decided to drop the bomb. I picked up my napkin and dabbed my mouth. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with the cool, detached precision of a news anchor. Well, I said, regardless of how you feel about it, the event is happening, and just so you know, I will not be needing a ride to the airport. Taking the bus, Mallory sneered. No, I said. The organization is sending a car. They are covering my first-class flight. They have booked me a suite at the Hay Adams Hotel for 3 nights. All expenses paid. The fork stopped moving. My father froze with his glass halfway to his mouth. First class, he asked. The numbers were computing in his head. First-class tickets to D.C. were not cheap. Organizations that gave out lowly awards did not pay for first class. Yes, I continued, enjoying the silence. And you should probably know that the ceremony is being broadcast live on NNC, national coverage, primetime. They have asked for a pre-show interview. They seem to think my story is quite compelling. I watched the information land. I watched my father's face turn a shade of gray. I watched Mallory's smirk falter. NNC. Live was not a local access channel. It was the biggest network in the country. It was the channel my father watched every night to check his stocks. National TV? My mother asked, her voice trembling slightly. You mean people will see you? Millions of people, I said, including all of your friends at the country club. I imagine. I let that sink in. I let them realize that the daughter they hid away was about to be more visible than any of them had ever been. I let them realize that they had declined an invitation to the biggest night of the year. The silence in the room stretched out, thick and suffocating. They should have asked questions. They should have asked who nominated me. They should have asked why a teacher award was getting primetime coverage, but they didn't. Their pride was a physical barrier. To ask was to admit that they had underestimated me. To ask was to admit that I had value they had not assigned. So they sat there, chewing their lamb in stubborn, stunned silence. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I think I'm going to head out, I said, standing up. I have a lot of packing to do, and I need to write my speech. You haven't had dessert, my mother said weakly. It is crème brûlée. I am full, I said. I looked at my father one last time. He was staring at his plate, his jaw set hard. He knew. Somewhere deep down, he knew he had made a tactical error, but Grant Hughes never apologized. Good luck with the merger. Mallory, I said. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I walked through the foyer with its crystal chandelier and the portraits of my ancestors who would probably have hated me too. I walked out the front door and into the cool night air. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently until it clicked. I got into my car. my hands shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had done it. I had sat in the fire, and I had not burned. I had left them sitting in that expensive room with their expensive china and their expensive silence, while I walked away toward a future they could not control. I started the engine and drove away. I did not look back at the house. I drove toward the highway, toward the airport, toward Washington. The darkness of the road felt welcoming. For the first time, I wasn't driving away from something. I was driving toward myself. The highway stretched out before me like a ribbon of black silk, illuminated only by the rhythmic sweep of streetlights and the crimson glow of taillights ahead. The silence inside my car was a stark contrast to the suffocating noise of the dinner I had just left. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white, but the shaking had stopped. In its place was a vibrating hum of adrenaline, the kind that comes after you walk away from a car crash without a scratch. I had done it. I had dropped the truth on their platinum plates and walked out. My phone, resting in the cup holder, lit up. The ringtone was not the jarring buzz I assigned to my parents or the generic chime for the school district. It was a soft, jazzy piano melody, the specific ringtone for Dr. Evelyn Hart, my grandmother. I tapped the button on the steering wheel to answer. "Hi, Grandma. Tell me you did not eat the lamb." Her voice came through the speakers, crisp and authoritative. It was a voice that had commanded auditoriums of unruly high schoolers and negotiated with fierce school boards for 40 years. "Linda always overcooks it. She thinks expensive meat needs to be punished until it surrenders." I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. I did not stay long enough to find out. "Wait, how did you know I was there?" "I know the schedule of the Hughes family circus," she said dryly. "And I know that 2 days before a major event, Linda feels the compulsive need to stage a production of Happy Family to reassure herself that everything is under control. But that is not why I'm calling." There was a pause, a beat of silence that felt heavy with significance. "I am calling," she continued, her tone shifting from grandmotherly to professional, "because my phone has been ringing off the hook since 5 o'clock this evening. It seems the education world talks faster than your family does. Congratulations, finalist." I merged into the middle lane, blinking back sudden tears. Hearing the word finalist from her meant more than hearing it from the committee itself. Evelyn Hart was not just my grandmother. She was a legend. She had been a superintendent for 20 years, a principal for 10 before that. She had written textbooks on curriculum development. In the world of education, her name opened doors that were welded shut for everyone else. "I wanted to tell you," I said, my voice cracking. "I sent a text to the group chat, but well, you know how they are." "I know exactly how they are," Evelyn said. "They are people who think value is something you count, not something you feel. Forget them for a minute. I need to ask you something. Did you read the nomination letter closely?" "I read it," I said. "I read it a dozen times." "Did you read the part about the nominator?" she pressed. I frowned, glancing at the road. "It said they were anonymous. It said they were a renowned educator. It said more than that." "Peyton," Evelyn said. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming serious. "It said the nominator has only put forward 3 names in a 30-year career, and that every single one of them went on to change the landscape of public education. It said this person does not waste ink on potential. They only bet on sure things." My heart skipped a beat. I had missed that detail in my initial shock. Or maybe I had read it but felt too unworthy to absorb it. "How do you know that?" I asked. The letter I got was a standard form for finalists. It did not have those specific stats. "I have old friends on the committee. Peyton," she said. I could practically hear the smirk through the phone. "You do not spend 4 decades in this business without knowing whose ear to whisper into. I made a few calls. I wanted to make sure they were treating you right." "Grandma," I said, a suspicion beginning to form in the back of my mind. "You sound like you know who it is." "I have my theories," she said, evasive but playful. "But that is not the point. The point is that someone with a lot of weight behind their name looked at you at the teacher in room B112 who stays late to help kids with their college essays, at the woman who buys lunch for the students who forgot theirs and they saw a winner. They saw the best of us. I don't feel like a winner, I admitted. Tonight, at dinner, Mallory made me feel like I was a joke, like I was playing pretend. Mallory, Evelyn scoffed. Mallory is a shark in a fishbowl. She thinks the glass walls are the edge of the world. She has no idea what is out there in the ocean. And you, my dear, are the ocean. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had worn in 2 days. I am coming to D.C., Evelyn announced suddenly. I nearly swerved. What, Grandma? No, it is too much travel. Your hip? My hip is fine, she interrupted, and I did not ask for permission. I have already booked my flight. I will be staying at the Hay Adams, same as you. I have some business to attend to in the city anyway, old connections to refresh. But Mom and Dad, your mother and father do not control my itinerary, she said sharply, and they certainly do not control who I choose to support. If they are too blind to see the light, that is their tragedy. I will not let it be yours. I will be there. Peyton, front row, and I suggest you wear the emerald dress. It brings out your eyes. Grandma, I whispered. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. Her voice softened, becoming cryptic. The truth has a way of finding people. Peyton, it usually shows up right when they think it never will. And when it does, it tends to be quite loud. You just focus on your speech. Let the universe handle the rest. She hung up before I could ask what she meant. I drove the rest of the way home in a daze. The truth has a way of finding people. What truth? And why did she sound like she was orchestrating something? I thought about the description of the nominator. Renowned educator, only 3 nominations in 30 years, never wrong. My grandmother had retired 5 years ago. But before that, she was the kind of superintendent who could make a mayor sweat. She was known for her impossible standards. She was known for spotting talent in places no one else looked. Could it be no? It couldn't be. The committee rules were strict. Family members could not nominate candidates. It was an immediate disqualification. I pushed the thought away. It was probably one of her old colleagues, someone she had mentored who was now in a position of power. That explained how she knew. That explained the old friends. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex. The building was quiet, a stark difference from the estate I had just left. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my unit, my mind racing. I unlocked my door and tossed my keys on the counter. My laptop was sitting on the coffee table. Open to my email. I had left it there to monitor any last-minute updates from the committee. The screen was glowing. A new notification sat at the top of the inbox. From Sarah Jenkins, executive producer, NNC, National Live. Subject urgent. Pre-show interview request. The story. Everyone is talking about. I froze. I sat down on the sofa without taking off my coat. I clicked the email. Dear Ms. Hughes, I hope this email finds you well. Following the announcement of the finalists earlier this week, our production team has been tracking the social media engagement and the internal buzz surrounding your nomination. To put it frankly, your story is making waves. There is a narrative here that is resonating with people: the dedication, the community impact, and the mystery surrounding your nomination. We want to capture that. We would like to schedule an exclusive sit-down interview with you to air during the pre-show segment, right before the main ceremony begins. This would be a 5-minute feature. It is a prime slot. We want to talk about your philosophy, your struggles, and what this award means to you personally. Please let us know if you are available tomorrow morning for a prep call. Best, Sarah Jenkins. I read the email 3 times, making waves. Mystery surrounding your nomination. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was getting bigger than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just an award ceremony anymore. It was a television event. A 5-minute feature on NNC was worth millions in advertising. It was the kind of exposure people killed for, and my family had no idea. I looked at my phone. The group chat was still silent. They were probably still sitting at that table, drinking their wine, complaining about my rudeness, reassuring themselves that I was just a teacher playing dress-up. A thought occurred to me. I should tell them. The good daughter instinct kicked in. I should text them and say, "Hey, turn on the TV early. I am being interviewed." But then I remembered the nonsense comment. I remembered Mallory's laugh. I remembered my mother's pity. If I told them, they would find a way to ruin it. They would make a comment about my hair. They would ask if I was going to embarrass them. Or worse, they would suddenly want to come, not to support me, but to be seen near the camera. No. I closed my laptop. I was done seeking their validation. I was done giving them updates they did not earn. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Sarah Jenkins. "Dear Sarah, I am available. Let's do it." I hit send. Then I typed a text to Evelyn. "See you in DC. I am wearing the emerald dress." I did not text the group chat. I let the silence stand. They wanted to believe I was lowly. They wanted to believe my world was small. Fine. Let them believe it. Let them sit in their comfortable ignorance for 48 more hours. Because when that screen lit up on Friday night, they were not just going to see their daughter, they were going to see a stranger who was powerful, respected, and completely out of their reach. The truth was indeed coming to find them, and just as Evelyn promised, it was going to be very, very loud. The champagne in my glass was real. The condensation on the flute was cold against my fingertips, and the bubbles rose in a perfect, mesmerizing line toward the surface. I sat in seat 3A, a leather recliner that felt more like a throne than an airplane seat. For the first time in my life, I was flying business class. When the flight attendant approached me, she did not look through me. She did not use that polite but dismissive tone people often reserve for tired women in cardigans holding stacks of grading papers. She looked me in the eye. "Ms. Hughes," she asked, "can I get you another warm towel before we land?" Ms. Hughes. It sounded different here. At school, it was a name shouted in hallways or whined during detention. At my parents' house, it was a label attached to disappointment. But here, at 30,000 feet, in this cabin that smelled of expensive cologne and silence, it sounded like a title. It sounded like it belonged to someone who mattered. "No, thank you," I said, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. "I am fine." I looked out the window as the plane banked over the Potomac River. The monuments of Washington, D.C., rose up from the ground like white bones against the gray sky. The Washington Monument, the Jefferson Memorial, the sprawling grid of power where decisions were made that shook the world. My stomach did a slow, nervous flip. I was not just visiting, I was being summoned. When I stepped off the plane, there was a man waiting for me at the bottom of the escalator. He was wearing a black suit that fit him perfectly, and he was holding a tablet with my name on it, Peyton Hughes. Not teacher, not Grant Hughes' daughter, just me. "Ms. Hughes," he said, taking my carry-on bag before I could protest. "I am David. I will be taking you to the Hay Adams." The car was a black Lincoln Navigator with tinted windows. The leather seats were soft, and the air conditioning was set to a precise, comfortable chill. As we glided through the traffic, I felt a strange sense of dislocation. This was the kind of treatment my father expected. This was the world Mallory fought tooth and nail to inhabit, and I had stumbled into it by doing the one thing they told me was worthless: teaching middle school English. We pulled up to the Hay Adams Hotel, a historic Italian Renaissance building that sat directly across from the White House. It radiated a quiet, terrifying elegance. Doormen in uniform rushed to open the car door. The lobby was a cavern of marble, dark wood, and fresh floral arrangements that likely cost more than my annual classroom budget. I approached the check-in desk, feeling the familiar itch of imposter syndrome. I expected the clerk to look at my ID, frown, and tell me there had been a mistake. I expected him to tell me the Motel 6 was down the road. Instead, he smiled. "Welcome, Ms. Hughes. We have been expecting you. The National Teacher of the Year Committee has arranged a suite for you overlooking Lafayette Square." A suite. I took the keycard, my hand trembling slightly. As I walked to the elevator, I caught a glimpse of myself in a gilded mirror. I looked the same hair, same sensible shoes, but the context had changed the picture entirely. I did not look like a lowly teacher. I looked like a woman on a mission. I went up to my room, dropped my bag, and walked to the window. The White House was right there. I could practically count the windows. I pressed my hand against the glass. "Okay, Peyton," I whispered. "You are here. You belong here." I had to repeat it because I did not quite believe it yet. An hour later, I went down to the Lafayette room for the welcome reception. This was the first time the finalists were meeting each other. I had read their bios in the packet, but seeing them in person was different. There was Julian, a high school physics teacher from California, who had helped his students launch a microsatellite into orbit with NASA. He was wearing a bow tie and laughing loudly near the bar. There was Maria, a special education teacher from Texas who had single-handedly lobbied the state legislature to change the funding laws for nonverbal students. She had a presence that was both warm and formidable, like a steel beam wrapped in velvet. There was David, a music teacher from inner-city Chicago who had a 100% college acceptance rate for his choir members. And there was Sarah, a history teacher from Maine who had uncovered a lost colonial settlement with her 8th graders. I stood by the entrance, clutching my sparkling water, feeling a sudden, sharp wave of inadequacy. These people were giants. They had changed laws. They had launched satellites. What had I done? I taught the outsiders. I bought lunch for kids who were hungry. I listened. "You must be Peyton," a voice said. I turned to see Maria standing there. She had kind eyes and a handshake that could crush a rock. "I read your file," she said, still holding my hand. "The committee sent around summaries of our work. That literacy initiative you started, the one where you got the local barbershops to stock books, so kids would read while they waited." I blinked. "Yes, that was a small thing." "It was brilliant," Maria said firmly. "We are trying to replicate it in my district. You met the kids where they were. That is the job. Do not downplay it." I felt a flush of heat in my cheeks. It was not shame. It was the unfamiliar sensation of being seen by a peer who understood the work. "Thank you," I said. "Your work with the legislature is incredible." "Necessity," she said with a shrug. "We do what we have to do, but I am glad to meet you. There is a lot of buzz about you." "Peyton?" "Buzz?" I asked. "The mystery nomination," she said, leaning in slightly. "Everyone is trying to figure out who wrote your letter. The rumor is that it is someone who hasn't been active in 20 years but still pulls all the strings." Before I could answer, a bell chimed, signaling us to take our seats for the orientation. I found my place at a round table near the front. On the table was a thick-bound program for the next 2 days, the National Teacher of the Year Symposium and Awards Gala. I opened the program, scanning the schedule, interviews, panels, the gala dinner, and then, on the second page, under the list of dignitaries and speakers, my eyes caught a familiar name. Guest of honor and keynote introduction, Dr. Evelyn Hart. I stopped breathing for a second. It did not list her as guest of Peyton Hughes. It did not list her as retired superintendent. It listed her as the guest of honor. I looked around the room, suddenly realizing the scale of this. My grandmother was not just tagging along to support her granddaughter. She was a central pillar of this event. The realization washed over me with a mix of shock and pride. My family treated Evelyn like an eccentric old woman who knitted scarves and complained about the weather. But here, she was royalty. I needed to find her. I excused myself before the first speaker started and slipped out to the lobby. I texted her, "I am in the lobby. Are you here?" "Look up," came the reply. I looked toward the grand staircase. Descending the steps was Dr. Evelyn Hart. She was not wearing her usual comfortable cardigans. She was wearing a tailored navy suit with a silk scarf, and she was walking with a cane that looked more like a scepter than a mobility aid. She saw me and stopped. Her face, usually so composed and stern, softened into an expression I had rarely seen. It was pride, unfiltered, radiant pride. "Grandma," I said, walking toward her. She reached the bottom of the stairs and pulled me into a hug that knocked the wind out of me. Evelyn was not a hugger. She was a pat-on-the-back woman, but she held me tight, smelling of lavender and iron will. "You made it," she whispered into my ear. "You stood up, and you walked out, and you made it." She pulled back, holding me by the shoulders. Her eyes were searching my face, looking for any cracks. "I saw the program," I said. "Guest of honor." "They have been asking me to come back for a decade," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "I always told them no. I told them I would only come back when I had a reason." She tapped my cheek. "You are the reason." "Grandma," I said, my voice trembling. "Did you nominate me?" Evelyn sighed. She steered me toward a quiet seating area in the corner of the lobby, away from the prying eyes of the hotel guests. We sat down on a velvet settee. "Technically," she said. "Yes, but it wasn't nepotism. Peyton, that is what your father would say. Isn't it that I pulled strings for family?" "He would," I admitted. "He would be wrong," she said fiercely. "I did not nominate you because you are my granddaughter. I nominated you because I have been watching you for 10 years, and I have the receipts." "Receipts?" "I have a file," she said. "Every time you told me about a student you helped, every time you mentioned staying late to run that drama club because the district cut the funding, every time you spent your own money on winter coats, I wrote it down. I tracked the data. I followed up on some of those students myself. Years later," I stared at her, "you followed up on my students." "I needed to know if the impact lasted," she said. "And it did. Peyton, do you have any idea how rare you are? You are a quiet storm. You don't brag. You don't ask for bonuses. You just change lives. One by one, in the dark, I decided it was time to turn the lights on." Tears pricked my eyes. "I just thought no one noticed. Mom and Dad always made it seem like I was wasting my potential." "Your mother and father measure potential in dollars," Evelyn spat. "I measure it in legacy. And you have built a legacy that will outlast every merger Mallory ever closes." She reached into her purse and pulled out a vintage handkerchief. She pressed it into my hand. "Dry your eyes," she commanded gently. "We have work to do, and you need to be ready for the gala tomorrow night." "I am ready," I said, wiping my face. "I have my speech." "Good," she said. "But there is one more thing. The program says there will be a testimonial speaker for each finalist, a former student." "I saw that," I said. "I was wondering who they picked. I have had so many over the years." Evelyn smiled. It was a slow, secretive smile that made the hair on the back of my arms stand up. "I picked him," she said. "Him?" I asked. "Who is it? Is it Marcus? Or maybe David from the debate team?" "No," Evelyn said. She leaned back, looking satisfied. "It is someone the whole country is going to recognize. Someone whose name has been in the news quite a bit lately, though not everyone connects him to you yet." "Grandma, you are scaring me," I said. "Who is it?" "You will see tomorrow," she said. "But I will tell you this. When he walks out on that stage, and when he tells the world what you did for him, your father is going to choke on his vintage wine." She stood up, smoothing her suit. "He is the final piece of evidence. Peyton," she said. "I waited until he was ready. I waited until you were ready. And tomorrow night, the trap snaps shut." "Trap?" I asked, standing up with her. "Not a trap for you," she said, her eyes twinkling. "A trap for the lie that says you are just anything. Tomorrow, we kill that lie." She turned to head toward the ballroom. "Now, come on, introduce me to this Maria from Texas. I have some questions about her legislative strategy." I followed her, my heart pounding a rhythm of anticipation and terror. I looked at her straight back, her confident stride. I realized then that I had never really known my grandmother. I had known the role she played in our family. But I hadn't known the general, and now, the general was leading me into battle. I thought of my phone upstairs, silent and dark. I thought of my parents in Cleveland, likely sleeping the sleep of the self-righteous. They had no idea what was coming. Evelyn Hart had been playing a long game, a game of chess that spanned a decade, and she had just moved her queen into position. I took a deep breath of the expensive hotel air. For the first time in 33 years, I didn't feel lowly, I felt dangerous. While I was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the Hay Adams Hotel, trying to stop my hands from shaking as I smoothed the emerald silk of my dress. A very different scene was unfolding 300 miles away in Cleveland. I did not know it at the time. I was too busy trying to breathe, too busy listening to my grandmother's instructions about posture and eye contact. But later, when the dust settled and the receipts were laid out for the world to see, I would learn exactly what my family was doing while I prepared to change my life. I would learn it through the testimony of strangers, through the digital footprints they carelessly left behind, and through the cold, hard evidence of a recording that would become the most listened-to audio file in the state of Ohio. It started at noon. My sister, Mallory, was holding court at the Gilded Table, a restaurant where the waiting list was 6 months long and the lunch menu cost more than my car payments. She was there with 2 other senior associates and a man named Elias Vance. Elias was a new transfer to their firm. He was quiet, meticulous, and known for his obsession with accuracy. He was the kind of lawyer who recorded every meeting, every lunch, and every casual coffee chat to ensure that his notes were impeccable. He used a transcription app on his phone, a piece of software that automatically generated text from speech. He placed his phone face down on the white tablecloth. Right next to the breadbasket, the red light was pulsing, silent and unseen. "So," one of the associates asked, cutting into a piece of seared tuna, "I heard your sister is up for some big award this weekend. Teacher of the Year or something. That is cute." I can imagine Mallory's reaction perfectly. I can hear the sharp intake of breath, the way she would have rolled her eyes, the way she would have leaned back in her chair to distance herself from the topic. "Oh, please," Mallory said. Her voice was captured with crystal clarity by the microphone 3 inches away. "Do not get her started." She sent this dramatic text to the family chat like she had won the Nobel Prize. "It is just a participation trophy for people who couldn't hack it in the corporate world." "That is harsh," the associate laughed, clearly enjoying the cruelty. "But I get it. My brother is a teacher. He's always complaining about being tired. I am like, try working 80 hours a week on a merger. Then talk to me about tired." "Exactly," Mallory said. "Peyton has always been soft. She likes the idea of saving the world, but she does not want to do the hard work of actually running it, this nomination thing. It is just a pat on the back for being a glorified babysitter. It is a joke. I mean, I love her, but let's be real. She is playing house in a classroom while the adults are out here actually generating value." Elias Vance did not laugh. Later, I would find out that Elias Vance's wife was the director of a nonprofit organization that funded literacy programs in inner-city schools. I would find out that his wife had been a teacher for 15 years before burnout forced her to quit. I would find out that Elias sat there, chewing his salad, listening to my sister reduce his wife's life's work to babysitting. He did not say a word. He just let the phone keep recording. He let Mallory dig her own grave, sentence by sentence. "So you aren't going?" the associate asked. "God, no," Mallory scoffed. "I have standards. Besides, who wants to sit in a stuffy auditorium and watch a bunch of people cry about chalk and underfunding? I have a dinner reservation tonight that I had to call in 3 favors to get. That is my priority." The recording ended 20 minutes later when the check came. Elias saved the file. He named it lunch_meeting_November_18. He uploaded it to his cloud storage, and he sat on it, waiting for the right moment. He did not know that the moment would come much sooner than he expected. 6 hours later, as the sun set over the Potomac and the lights of the Kennedy Center began to twinkle in the distance, my family gathered for their own celebration. They went to Prime, a steakhouse that prided itself on having the darkest mahogany walls and the coldest martinis in the city. It was the kind of place where Grant Hughes felt most at home. My father sat at the head of the table. My mother, Linda, sat to his right. Mallory and Trevor were opposite them. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect American family, successful, attractive, wealthy. They were ordering bottles of wine that cost $400. They were laughing. They were celebrating Mallory. To the future, Grant said, raising his glass. To the fact that a Hughes is finally taking her rightful place at the top of the food chain. Here, here, Mallory said, clinking her glass against his. It is a shame Peyton isn't here, Linda said. Her voice was light, airy, the voice of a woman who wants to appear maternal without actually doing the work of mothering. I do hope she is okay in D.C. Do you think she is nervous? Nervous? Grant snorted. About what? It is a room full of teachers. Linda, it is not a boardroom. The stakes are zero. If she trips on stage, they will probably just give her a hug and a gold star for trying. Mallory giggled. She sent another email, saying she was ready to tell her story. Can you imagine what story? One time, a kid forgot his pencil, and I gave him one. The end. Trevor shifted in his seat. My brother-in-law had been quiet all evening. He had checked his phone under the table 3 times. He had seen the NNC app. He had seen the banner ad that was running on the homepage. Tonight, the teacher who changed the game. An exclusive interview with finalist Peyton Hughes. He knew this was not a small ceremony in a high school gym. He knew this was national news. Guys, Trevor said. His voice was hesitant. I think we might be underestimating this. Mallory turned to him, her eyes narrowing. Trevor, do not start. We are celebrating me tonight. Do not ruin it by bringing up her little hobby. It is not a hobby. Mal, Trevor said, pushing his plate away. I looked it up. The broadcast is on NNC, primetime. They are projecting 5 million viewers. The table went silent for a heartbeat. 5 million? Linda asked, her hand fluttering to her pearl necklace. That sounds like a lot. It is NNC, Grant said dismissively. Though his eyes flickered with a moment of doubt, they probably put it on their secondary channel, the one nobody watches, NNC 2 or 3. It is filler content. Trevor, don't be dramatic. It is NNC 1, Grant, Trevor said. And the interview starts in 20 minutes. Enough, Mallory snapped. She slammed her hand down on the table, causing the silverware to jump. I am sick of talking about her. This is my night. If she wants to play pretend on TV, let her. I am the one with the partnership track. I am the one sitting here paying for this dinner. So can we please focus on reality? Trevor looked at his wife. He looked at the hard set of her jaw, the cruelty in her eyes. He opened his mouth to argue, to tell them that they were about to be blindsided. But then he closed it. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that they did not want to know. They needed Peyton to be small so they could feel big. The truth was an inconvenience they were not willing to purchase. Fine, Trevor said softly. To you, Mallory. Just then, a waiter walked by. He was young, maybe 22, carrying a tray of appetizers to the table next to them. On the far wall of the restaurant, above the bar, a large flat-screen television was playing NNC quietly in the background. It was the nightly news teaser. Suddenly, my face flashed on the screen. It was a promotional shot the network had taken earlier that day. I was looking directly into the camera, serious and strong, with the Capitol building behind me. The chyron beneath my face read, The Dark Horse. Why America is watching Peyton Hughes tonight. The waiter stopped. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at the table he was passing. He looked at Grant. He looked at Mallory. The family resemblance was undeniable. Excuse me, the waiter said, pausing near Grant's chair. I am sorry to interrupt, but is that your daughter on the TV? Grant froze. He did not turn around to look at the screen. He stared straight ahead at his steak. No, Grant said coldly. You must be mistaken. Oh, the waiter said, looking confused. She looks exactly like the lady sitting there, and the last name on the screen is Hughes. I just thought it was cool. My mom is a teacher, so we are tuning in." "I said you are mistaken," Grant snapped. "We are here to eat, not to chat about television. Can we get some service, or do I need to speak to your manager?" The waiter recoiled, as if he had been slapped. "I am sorry, sir. Right away." He hurried off, disappearing into the kitchen. "Unbelievable," Mallory muttered, shaking her head. "People are so intrusive." "Ignore it," Grant said, though his hand was gripping his wineglass so hard his knuckles were white. Just ignore it. But the mood was broken. A silent tension had settled over the table. They knew. Deep down, in the places they refused to acknowledge, they knew something was happening that they could not control. Mallory decided to reclaim the narrative the only way she knew how. She pulled out her phone. "Let's take a picture," she said brightly. "For the gram. Show everyone how we celebrate real winning." She leaned in close to Grant and Linda. She forced a dazzling, wide smile. Grant put on his boardroom face. Linda tilted her head to the flattering angle. Click. Mallory spent the next 3 minutes editing the photo. She adjusted the lighting to make the diamonds on her fingers sparkle more. She whitened their teeth. She added a filter that made the expensive wine look even more rich and red. She typed the caption. She wanted it to sting. She wanted me to see it later and know that I had been excluded. Celebrating the big promotion with the people who matter most. Success tastes better when you share it with your tribe. Family first, real success. Lawyer life winning. She hit post. The image went live at 7:45. At 7:46, I was backstage in Washington, having my microphone clipped to my lapel. At 7:46, Elias Vance was sitting in his home office, scrolling through his feed. He saw Mallory's post. He saw the hashtag #FamilyFirst. He looked at the recording file on his desktop. At 7:46, the universe aligned. Mallory thought she had posted a victory lap. In reality, she had just posted the evidence that would convict her of supreme hypocrisy. She had captioned a photo, "Family First," at the exact moment she was letting her sister stand alone on a national stage. The comments started coming in almost immediately from her friends. "Yas Queen. Congrats Mal. Beautiful family." But the tide was about to turn, because in 14 minutes, the red light on the camera in Washington would turn on. In 14 minutes, the interview would start. And in 14 minutes, the Hughes family dinner was going to turn from a celebration into a wake. I took a deep breath. Standing in the wings, I did not know about the photo. I did not know about the recording. I only knew that for the first time in my life, I was not waiting for them. They were about to be waiting for me. The stage lights hit me like a physical blow. It was not the soft, yellow glow of a classroom overhead projector. This was a blinding, clinical white heat that washed out the edges of my vision and left me standing in a pool of absolute exposure. Behind the curtain, in the wings, my hands had been cold, wrapped around each other like 2 blocks of ice. But out here, under the gaze of the cameras, my heart was hammering a hot, frantic rhythm against my ribs. I stood on the mark the stage manager had taped to the floor, a small blue X that felt like the center of the universe. To my left stood the other 4 finalists. We were a line of soldiers in formal wear, blinking into the abyss of the auditorium. Somewhere out there in the dark, beyond the glare of the spotlights, sat 2,000 people. These were not just parents and school board members. The front rows were filled with senators, tech billionaires who claimed to care about education reform, and journalists with their laptops open, ready to broadcast our stories to the world. The host of NNC National Live, a man whose face I had watched on television for a decade, stepped up to the podium. His voice boomed through the speakers, deep and resonant. "Tonight," he said, and the room fell into a hush that felt reverent. "Tonight, we do not celebrate profit margins. We do not celebrate poll numbers. Tonight, we celebrate the architects of the American soul. We celebrate the teachers." Applause rippled through the room. polite but heavy with expectation. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. I felt small. The imposter syndrome that had lived in my gut for 33 years began to crawl up my spine. What am I doing here, I thought. Mallory is right. I am just a teacher from Ohio. I am just Peyton. But before we announce our winner, the host continued, we wanted to do something different this year. You have read their files. You have seen their statistics. But the measure of a teacher is not found on a spreadsheet. It is found in the lives they have touched. So, we have invited a surprise guest for each of our finalists. A former student who has flown in tonight to tell you the truth about the person standing on this stage. I froze. A student I had not prepared for this. I looked frantically toward the front row. The lights were too bright to see faces clearly, but I knew where Evelyn was sitting. I squinted, and for a fleeting second, I saw her silhouette. She was sitting perfectly straight, her cane resting against her knee. She gave a single, sharp nod. Now, the nod said, just listen. The first 3 testimonials were beautiful. A scientist spoke for the physics teacher. A lawyer spoke for the special education teacher. They were moving, tearful tributes. Then, it was my turn. For our final finalist, Ms. Peyton Hughes, the host said, please welcome a young man who says he owes his life to the time he spent in room B112. The heavy velvet curtain to my right parted. A man walked out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that was tailored to perfection. He walked with a confidence that commanded the entire room. His face was familiar not just to me, but to everyone. I heard a gasp ripple through the audience. People leaned forward in their seats. It was Caleb Monroe. My breath caught in my throat. I had not seen Caleb in 14 years. The last time I saw him, he was wearing a torn hoodie and carrying a trash bag full of his clothes, because his mother had been evicted again. Today, Caleb Monroe was one of the most respected investigative journalists in the country. He was the man who had broken the story on the water crisis in the Midwest. He had reported from war zones. He had founded a scholarship fund that put 300 kids through college last year. He was a household name, and he was walking toward me. He stopped at the podium, gripping the edges with hands that used to shake from hunger. He looked out at the audience, then he turned and looked directly at me. His eyes were warm, crinkled at the corners. "Good evening," Caleb said. His voice was steady, the voice of a man who spoke truth to power for a living. "My name is Caleb Monroe. Most of you know me as the guy who chases politicians down hallways or reports from the front lines. You call me brave. You call me successful." He paused, letting the silence build. But 14 years ago, I was none of those things. I was a 7th grader with an empty stomach and a warrant for my father's arrest taped to our front door. I was angry. I was tired. And I had made a decision. I decided that on my 16th birthday, I was going to drop out of school and run drugs for the crew on my block. It seemed like the only way to survive. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I felt tears pricking my eyes. I remembered that anger. I remembered the way he used to sit in the back of the class, staring at the wall, daring anyone to speak to him. "Then," Caleb continued, "I met Ms. Hughes." He gestured to me, his hand open and inviting. "Ms. Hughes did not save me with a grand speech," he said. "She did not stand on a desk and recite poetry. Hollywood loves those moments. But that is not how teaching works. Real teaching is 1,000 tiny acts of mercy that go unnoticed." He looked down at his notes, then abandoned them. He spoke from the heart. "She noticed that I never went to the cafeteria. She didn't ask why. She just started leaving half her sandwich on my desk every day. She claimed she was on a diet. She did that for 2 years. I never told her this. But some days, that sandwich was the only thing I ate." A tear slipped down my cheek. I hadn't known he knew. "When our electricity got cut off," Caleb said, his voice thickening with emotion, "I couldn't do my homework because I couldn't see the pages after sunset. Other teachers gave me zeros. Ms. Hughes gave me a flashlight and a pack of batteries. She told me she had extra supplies from a camping trip. Ms. Hughes hates camping. Laughter rippled through the crowd, warm and genuine. She didn't just teach me how to write an essay, Caleb said, his voice rising, filling the cavernous space. She taught me that my voice mattered. She was the first person in my life, the first person who looked at me and didn't see a thug or a charity case. She saw a writer. She told me, "Caleb, you have a fire in you. Don't burn the house down. Use it to light the way." He turned to face me fully now. He ignored the audience. "I am standing here tonight," he said to me, "reporting on the injustices of the world, because you taught me that justice starts in a classroom. You saved me. Peyton, you saved me every single day, without asking for a thank you, without asking for credit. You are the reason I am alive." He turned back to the crowd. "If that is not the definition of a hero," he said, "then I do not know what is." For a second, there was silence. Then, the room exploded. 2,000 people stood up. It wasn't a polite ovation. It was a roar. It was the sound of a collective realization. Men in tuxedos were wiping their eyes. Women were clapping with their hands raised high. I stood there, paralyzed by the wave of love crashing over me. I looked down at the front row. Evelyn Hart was standing. She was not using her cane. Her hands were pressed to her mouth, and her shoulders were shaking. She was crying. For 33 years. I had seen my parents look at me with disappointment. I had seen them look at me with pity. But I had never seen anyone look at me the way Evelyn was looking at me right now. It was a look of fierce, unyielding victory. Caleb walked over to me and hugged me. He smelled like expensive soap and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered in my ear. "Thank you for the sandwich." "You are welcome," I choked out. The host returned to the podium. He waited for the applause to die down, but it took a long time. When the room finally settled, the energy had changed. The tension was gone. There was only a sense of inevitability. "We have 5 incredible finalists," the host said. But the committee's decision was unanimous. He held up a gold envelope. He did not drag it out. He did not need to. "The National Teacher of the Year," he announced, "is Peyton Hughes." My name rang out like a bell. Peyton Hughes, not Grant's daughter, not Mallory's sister, not the lowly teacher, Peyton Hughes. I stepped forward. The trophy was heavy in my hands, a crystal flame that caught the light and fractured it into 1,000 rainbows. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Maria, the finalist from Texas, cheering for me. I saw Caleb smiling. I saw Evelyn beaming, and then I looked up at the massive screen behind me. Usually, it just displayed the winner's name, but tonight, there was a second line of text, a line that Evelyn had ensured would be there, a line that was broadcast into millions of homes across America. National Teacher of the Year. Peyton Hughes nominated by Dr. Evelyn Hart. The camera zoomed in on my face, then cut to a wide shot that showed the text clearly, and at that exact second, 300 miles away, the universe delivered its receipt. In the dimly lit dining room of Prime in Cleveland, the air was already thick with an unspoken anxiety. The dinner had been awkward since the waiter's comment. Grant Hughes was trying to salvage the mood by ordering a second bottle of wine and talking loudly about the bond market. "The yields are up," he was saying, swirling his glass. "If we position the portfolio correctly before the quarter ends, we are looking at a 12% return." Mallory was scrolling through her phone, refreshing her Instagram, frowning at the fact that her Family First post wasn't getting as many likes as she expected. "People are so distracted tonight," she muttered. "Usually I get 50 likes in the first 10 minutes. Trevor was staring at his own phone in his lap, his face pale. He had the NNC livestream open. Muted, he saw the standing ovation. He saw Caleb Monroe. "Grant," Trevor whispered. "Grant, you need to look at this." "Not now." "Trevor," Grant said, annoyed. "I am explaining the bond yields." Then Grant's phone buzzed. It was lying face up on the white tablecloth. Right next to his bread plate, it vibrated aggressively, dancing slightly against the porcelain. It wasn't a text message, it was a news alert. Grant subscribed to the Bloomberg breaking news feed and the NNC top story alerts. He prided himself on knowing things before the general public. The screen lit up. The notification banner was bright red. Breaking News Teacher of the Year. Peyton Hughes delivers emotional win. Grant stopped talking. His eyes flicked to the phone. He read the headline. He blinked. Then, another notification popped up immediately below it. Watch famous journalist Caleb Monroe breaks down in tribute to the teacher who saved my life. Grant's hand moved slowly, like he was reaching into a fire. He unlocked the phone. He tapped the notification. The video player opened instantly. The sound was off, but the captions were on. He saw me. He saw his lowly daughter standing on a stage that looked like it belonged to the president. He saw the crystal trophy in my hands. He saw the crowd on their feet. But then, the camera angle on the phone screen changed. It showed the massive screen behind me. Grant read the text. Nominated by Dr. Evelyn Hart. His face lost all color. It went from the flush of wine to the gray of old ash in the span of a single heartbeat. Evelyn, his mother-in-law, the woman he had dismissed as a retired relic, the woman he thought he managed. She had done this. She had nominated me. She had orchestrated this entire night. "Dad," Mallory asked, looking up from her phone. "What is it? You look like you are having a stroke." Grant could not speak. He felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. He looked at the date on the post Mallory had just made. Family first. He looked at the time. He looked at the video of me holding the trophy, bathed in light, surrounded by adoration that money could not buy. And then, he looked at the waiter, who was standing near the bar, pointing at the television and whispering to another server. Grant Hughes realized, with a sickening lurch of his stomach, that he was not the protagonist of this story. He was not the hero. He wasn't even the villain. He was irrelevant. The Nonsense Award was the lead story on the national news. The daughter he wouldn't fly to see was currently the most celebrated woman in America, and he was sitting in a steakhouse in Cleveland, holding the bill. "Linda," he croaked, his voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. "Linda, look at the phone." Linda leaned over. She read the screen. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Is that Evelyn's name?" "She played us," Grant whispered. "She played us all." Mallory grabbed the phone from her mother's hand. She stared at the screen. She saw the number of views on the video. 2 million views in 10 minutes. She looked at her own Instagram post. 70 likes. The contrast was so sharp, so violent, that she actually dropped the phone onto the table with a clatter. Back in Washington, the applause was finally dying down. I stepped up to the microphone. I looked directly into the camera lens. I knew they were watching. I didn't need to check. I could feel their gaze across the miles. I took a breath. I didn't have a script. I didn't need one. "Thank you," I said to the room and to the camera. For a long time, I was told that my work was small, that it was lowly, that it didn't generate value. I paused. I let the words hang there. "But tonight," I said, my voice ringing clear and strong, "I think we have proven that the most valuable things in this world are not the ones you can count. They are the ones you can feel." I smiled. It was a dangerous, beautiful smile. This is for every teacher who has ever been told they are just a teacher. You are the architects of the future, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I lifted the trophy high. In Cleveland. The screen on Grant's phone went dark as the video ended, but the silence at the table was just beginning. It was a silence that would last a long, long time. The aftershocks of an earthquake are often more destructive than the initial tremor because they hit structures that have already been weakened. In the restaurant in Cleveland, the structural integrity of the Hughes family facade had been compromised the moment my name appeared on the screen. Now, the walls were coming down. I was not there to see it, but I know this scene as intimately as if I had been hovering above the table. I know it because Trevor told me later, his voice shaking with the memory. I know it because the internet keeps receipts. And I know it because, for the first time in history, the silence of my family was replaced by the deafening noise of public consequence. Grant Hughes, a man who prided himself on never being caught off guard, sat frozen. His phone was still playing the video loop of my victory, but his hands were trembling so violently that the device rattled against the china. He tried to speak, tried to summon the authoritative baritone that had commanded boardrooms for 40 years, but his voice box had seized up. He opened his mouth, and nothing came out but a dry, rasping sound of disbelief. Linda was the first to break. The color drained from her face so completely that she looked like a wax figure melting under the heat of the revelation. She pressed a napkin to her mouth, her eyes darting around the restaurant, terrified that someone she knew, someone who mattered, had seen the broadcast. But it was Mallory who provided the punctuation mark to the disaster. She had been staring at the view count on the video, her brain struggling to compute the math of my success versus her stagnation. In her shock, her grip on the stem of her wineglass loosened. The crystal goblet slipped from her fingers. It hit the edge of the platinum charger plate and shattered. Crack! The sound cut through the murmurs of the dining room. A dark, jagged stain of Cabernet Sauvignon began to bleed across the pristine white tablecloth. It spread rapidly, soaking into the fabric. A crimson blot that looked less like spilled wine and more like a fresh wound. The waiter, the same young man Grant had snapped at earlier, rushed over with a towel. "I will get that, ma'am," he said, his voice polite, but his eyes lingering on the phone screen that was still playing my speech. He knew. Everyone in the restaurant knew. "Leave it," Mallory hissed, shoving her chair back. "Just leave it." But they could not leave the reality of what was happening, because then the phones began to ring. It started with a single chime on Linda's phone, then a buzz on Grant's, then a relentless, cacophonous symphony of notifications on Mallory's device. It was not just the news alerts, it was the people. The Hughes family social circle was tight, judgmental, and viciously gossipy. They were the people who were currently sitting in their own living rooms, watching NNC and seeing the daughter of their friends being crowned a national hero. Grant's phone lit up with a text from the CEO of a rival firm watching the awards. "Incredible speech by Peyton. Why are you guys not in D.C.?" The camera cut to her section, and it was just her grandmother. Linda received a message from the head of the Charity League. "Linda, you never told us Peyton was the favorite. We are weeping over here. Is that Caleb Monroe? Why are you posting photos of a steak dinner while your daughter is making history?" The question was the same in every message, repeated 50 different ways. Where are you? Why aren't you there? It was the one question they could not answer without incriminating themselves. To say we were invited but didn't go made them look heartless. To say we didn't think it was important made them look stupid. To say nothing made them look estranged. They were trapped. Mallory, desperate to regain control of the narrative, did the only thing she knew how to do. She panicked. She grabbed her phone, her thumb flying across the screen. She needed to pivot. She needed to attach herself to the winning team before the ship sailed without her. She opened Instagram. She found a photo of us from 2 years ago, the only one she had on her phone. A selfie where she looked great, and I was blurry in the background. She typed a new caption, her fingers shaking. "So incredibly proud of my baby sister Peyton. We have always known she was destined for greatness. Watching you shine tonight from afar, but with you in spirit, crying happy tears. Sisterhood teacher of the year proud family," she hit post. She thought she was clever. She thought she could rewrite history with a hashtag. She was wrong. The internet is a living, breathing organism, and it smells inauthenticity like a shark smells blood. But the fatal blow did not come from a stranger. It came from Elias Vance. Elias had been waiting. He had finished his dinner. He was sitting in his home office, watching the gala on his iPad. He saw Mallory's post pop up on his feed. He read the caption, "Always known she was destined for greatness." He thought of his wife, who had cried earlier that evening watching Caleb Monroe's speech. He thought of the lunch meeting. He thought of the recording file named lunch_meeting_November_18. He did not upload the audio. He did not need to. He simply typed a comment. It appeared under Mallory's post 3 minutes after it went live. Interesting perspective. Mallory, at 12:15 this afternoon, during our lunch at the Gilded Table, you called this award a participation trophy for people who couldn't hack it. You called your sister a glorified babysitter. I have the audio notes from the meeting if you need a refresher. Perhaps you should sit this one out. Elias hit enter. The comment sat there for a moment, a small digital landmine. Then, someone took a screenshot. Then, it was shared on Twitter. Then, it was shared on the local Cleveland gossip pages. The explosion was instantaneous. The contrast between the proud sister post and the cold, hard testimony of a colleague was too juicy to ignore. The comments section under Mallory's post turned into a war zone. Receipts. Imagine mocking a teacher and then trying to ride her coattails. This is the lawyer handling the Henderson merger. Yikes! Mallory stared at her phone. Her face went from red to a terrifying shade of gray. She tried to delete the comment, but it was too late. The screenshot was already viral. The hashtag #LowlyTeacher started trending, but not in the way she wanted. People were using it to mock the elitism of families like ours. And then, the real consequences began. At 9:30, Mallory's phone rang. It was the managing partner of her law firm. She answered it at the table, her hand trembling. "Hello, Arthur. I know. Isn't it crazy? My sister..." "Mallory," Arthur's voice was like ice. "I am looking at a Twitter thread that has 10,000 retweets. It involves you, a senior associate of this firm, publicly disparaging the education sector. On the same night the country is celebrating it." "It is taken out of context," Mallory stammered, sweat beading on her forehead. "It was just a private joke." "There are no private jokes when you are representing the firm," Arthur said. "We represent the university hospital system. We represent the state teachers' pension fund. Do you understand the optics of this?" "I can fix it," Mallory pleaded. "You cannot fix it tonight," Arthur said. "We are pulling you off the Henderson merger. We cannot have you facing the board tomorrow morning with this hanging over you. We will discuss your future at the firm on Monday." The line went dead. Mallory dropped the phone. She looked at Grant. "I lost it," she whispered. "I lost the merger." Grant did not answer her. He was too busy staring at his own phone. He was scrolling through the voicemail I had left him 3 years ago on Father's Day, which he had never returned. He was looking at the text I sent 2 days ago. Just a lowly teacher. The weight of his own words was finally crushing him. He realized that the nonsense he had dismissed was actually the wrecking ball that was dismantling his family's reputation. He stood up. He grabbed his phone. He needed to fix this. He needed to manage the asset. He needed to get me on the phone and tell me to issue a statement, to tell people that we were close, that it was all a misunderstanding. He dialed my number. I was in the hotel suite at the Hay Adams. The ceremony was over. The gala was winding down. I had slipped away from the champagne and the handshakes because I needed a moment of silence. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Dad calling. I looked at it. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again. Dad. Calling. I picked it up, but I did not answer. I watched the name flash on the screen. Then, the voicemail notification appeared. Then a text. Peyton, call me. Immediately. It is urgent. Peyton, pick up. We need to coordinate a statement. Peyton, please. The please was new. Grant Hughes did not say please. I turned the phone over. Face down. I did not feel a surge of triumph. I did not feel the urge to answer and scream at him. I just felt done. I felt the kind of exhaustion that comes after you finally put down a heavy load you have been carrying for 33 years. Back in Cleveland. The dinner ended not with a toast, but with a retreat. They walked out of the restaurant in silence, ignoring the stares of the other patrons. They got into the car. Trevor was driving. Mallory was in the passenger seat, sobbing now, scrubbing at her face, ruining her makeup. How could he do that? She wailed. Elias, how could he betray me like that? Trevor kept his eyes on the road. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He didn't betray you, Mallory, Trevor said quietly. What? Mallory snapped, turning to him. Whose side are you on? He told the truth, Trevor said. His voice was getting louder. You said those things. You said them. And then you tried to pretend you didn't when you saw she was winning. I was supporting her, Mallory screamed. You were supporting yourself, Trevor shouted back, slamming his hand on the dashboard. You have never supported her. None of you have. You mocked her. You belittled her. And tonight, you got caught. Trevor, Linda gasped from the back seat. Lower your voice. No, Linda, Trevor said, looking at her in the rearview mirror. I am done lowering my voice. I sat there tonight and I watched Caleb Monroe talk about how Peyton saved his life. And I realized I am married to the people who tried to break her spirit. He pulled the car into the driveway of Grant's estate. He put it in park. I am not staying here tonight, Trevor said. What? Mallory whispered. I am going to a hotel, Trevor said. I can't be around this energy right now. I need to think about who I want to be, because I don't think I want to be a Hughes anymore. He got out of the car, grabbed his bag from the trunk, and called an Uber. Grant, Linda, and Mallory stood in the driveway, illuminated by the security lights of their mansion. They were alone. The merger was gone. The reputation was stained. The son-in-law was leaving, and the daughter they had cast aside was the only one standing tall. I sat in my hotel room, $2,000 a night, overlooking the White House. The crystal trophy sat on the desk, catching the light from the street lamps outside. I poured myself a glass of water. I sat down in the armchair and looked at the award. It was strange. I thought I would feel ecstatic. I thought I would want to dance, but instead, I felt a profound, quiet peace. It was the peace of knowing that the transaction was closed. I had spent my entire life trying to buy their love with my achievements, and the currency had never been enough. But tonight, I realized I didn't need to buy it. I didn't need them to sell it to me. I had found my value elsewhere. I found it in the tearful eyes of my grandmother. I found it in the steady voice of Caleb Monroe. I found it in the thousands of strangers who were currently flooding my inbox with messages of support. I looked at the phone one last time. The notifications were still rolling in. The world was loud. But in my room, it was quiet. I picked up the trophy. It was heavy, solid, real. I am Peyton Hughes, I whispered to the empty room, and I am enough. I didn't need to send a text. I didn't need to make a statement. My silence was the loudest thing I could offer them. It was a mirror, and for the first time, they were forced to look at their own reflections without me standing there to absorb the glare. The backpack was off, and I was ready to walk. 2 weeks passed before I agreed to see them. I spent those 14 days in a state of quiet reconstruction. I moved out of my apartment and into a temporary rental while I looked for a place that felt like mine. I answered emails from strangers who told me my speech had encouraged them to go back to school. I had coffee with Caleb Monroe, who treated me not like a savior, but like a peer. I breathed air that felt cleaner, lighter, and free of the smog of expectation. When I finally drove up the winding driveway of my parents' estate in Shaker Heights, the house looked different. For 33 years, this pile of brick and ivy had looked like a fortress, a place of intimidating power. Today, it just looked like a house. It looked expensive and well-maintained, but it felt hollow, like a stage set after the actors have gone home. I parked my car. I did not check my makeup in the rearview mirror. I did not brace myself. I simply walked to the front door and let myself in. They were waiting for me in the formal living room. It was a tableau of misery. My father, Grant, was standing by the fireplace, nursing a glass of scotch even though it was only 2 p.m. My mother, Linda, was sitting on the edge of the sofa, clutching a tissue, her eyes red-rimmed. Mallory was pacing the room, looking thinner and sharper than I had ever seen her. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and she wore no jewelry. The absence of her usual armor was jarring. When I entered, the room went silent. "You came," my mother said, her voice trembling. She made a move to stand up, perhaps to hug me, but something in my posture stopped her. I remained standing near the doorway. I was not there to join the circle. I was there to close it. "I came because you said we needed to talk," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the pleading tone I used to use in this room. "So, let's talk." Grant turned from the fireplace. He looked older. The last 2 weeks had etched new lines around his mouth. "Peyton," he began, using his boardroom voice, though it lacked its usual resonance. "We appreciate you coming. The last few weeks have been complicated. The media storm, the misunderstandings, it has been hard on everyone." "Complicated," I repeated. "Is that what we are calling it?" "It is a mess," Mallory snapped. Unable to contain herself, she stopped pacing and glared at me. "Do you have any idea what has happened to me? I have been put on administrative leave. My firm is investigating my conduct. I lost the Henderson merger. I have headhunters ghosting me. My reputation is in tatters because of a stupid comment on a stupid Instagram post. And whose fault is that?" "Mallory," I asked. "It is yours," she cried, her voice rising to a shriek. "You and your little ambush. You knew what you were doing. You knew Elias was there. You set me up." "I was 300 miles away," I said. "I didn't know Elias Vance existed until the internet told me. I didn't make you say those things, Mallory, and I certainly didn't make you post a lie about family pride while you were actively mocking me." "We were protecting the family image," Linda sobbed. "We just wanted everyone to get along. We didn't want a scene." "You didn't want a scene," I corrected her. "You wanted a scapegoat. You wanted me to remain the failure so you could all feel like successes." "That is not fair," Grant said, stepping forward. "We have provided for you. We have given you everything. You gave me money," I said, "and you used every cent of it as a leash. But we are not talking about money today. We are talking about respect." "I demand an apology," Mallory spat. She crossed her arms, trying to summon the ghost of her former authority. "You humiliated me publicly. You let people think I am a monster. If you want this family to move forward, you need to issue a statement. You need to tell the press that we are close and that you support me." I looked at her. I looked at the sheer, unadulterated audacity of her demand. Even now, in the wreckage of her own making, she believed she was the victim. She believed I existed to serve her narrative. I felt a sudden, sharp clarity. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. "Excuse me." Mallory blinked. "No," I said again. "I will not issue a statement. I will not clean up your mess, and I will certainly not apologize." "Peyton, be reasonable," Grant said, his voice tightening. "We are family. Families forgive. Everyone makes mistakes." "A mistake is forgetting a birthday," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "A mistake is burning the dinner. What you people did, what you have done to me for 30 years is not a mistake. It is a choice. You chose to belittle me. You chose to ignore me. You chose to make me the punchline of your jokes because it made you feel superior. That is not a mistake, Dad. That is a pattern, and I am breaking it." "So that is it," Mallory sneered. "You won a trophy. So now you want to destroy the family. Is that your revenge?" "I am not destroying anything," I said quietly. "I am just refusing to be the glue that holds your lies together. I am stopping. I am done being the shock absorber for your insecurity." "Insecurity?" Grant laughed, a harsh barking sound. "I built an empire. Peyton, I am not insecure." "You built an empire," I agreed. "And yet, you were so threatened by a middle school teacher winning an award that you couldn't even say congratulations. That sounds like insecurity to me." Grant's face turned purple. He opened his mouth to roar, to unleash the fury that had cowed me for decades. But before he could speak, the front door opened. The sound of a heavy cane hitting the hardwood floor echoed through the hallway. Thump, step, thump, step. The room went deadly silent. "Doctor." Evelyn Hart walked into the living room. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that looked like armor. She was carrying a thick leather portfolio under her arm. She did not look at Grant. She did not look at Mallory. She walked straight to the coffee table and dropped the portfolio. It landed with a heavy, final thud. "Mother," Linda whispered, "what are you doing here?" "I am here to finish the meeting," Evelyn said. Her voice was cool and crisp. She looked at me and winked a tiny, conspiratorial flash of blue eyes before turning her gaze on Grant. "You have been talking a lot about value lately, Grant," Evelyn said. "About who generates it, about who deserves it." "Evelyn, this is a private family matter," Grant warned. "It became public the moment your daughter trended on Twitter," Evelyn retorted. "Sit down, Grant. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order." Grant sat. Evelyn placed her hand on the leather portfolio. "For 20 years, she began. "You have been managing the Hart Family Trust. You have done a decent job. I will admit, the returns were adequate, and you always assumed that when I passed. The control of that trust and the principal inside it would transfer to you. You counted on it. You built your retirement strategy around it." Grant shifted uncomfortably. "It is the standard structure, Evelyn. We discussed this years ago." "We did," Evelyn said. "But trusts are revocable instruments, and standards change." She opened the portfolio. She pulled out a document stamped with a date. "This is the restated trust agreement," Evelyn said. "I signed it 2 days before the award ceremony. It completely restructures the asset allocation and the management authority." Grant leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What did you do?" "I removed you as the trustee," Evelyn said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Grant looked like he had been punched in the gut. "You can't do that," he stammered. "I am the financial expert. Who is going to manage it, Linda?" "No," Evelyn said. She turned and pointed a finger at me. "Peyton! Peyton!" Mallory shrieked. "She is a teacher. She doesn't know anything about wealth management." "She knows about value," Evelyn said sharply, "which is something none of you seem to understand." Evelyn slid the document across the table toward Grant. "Peyton is now the sole trustee," Evelyn declared. "And I have changed the beneficiary terms. The money is no longer a slush fund for vacation homes and luxury cars. The Hart Family Trust is now an educational endowment." "A what?" Linda gasped. "An endowment," Evelyn repeated. "The principal is locked. The interest, which is substantial, will be used to fund scholarships for underprivileged students, to build libraries in rural schools, and to provide grants for teachers who use their own money for supplies." She looked at Mallory. "There is a clause for family support," Evelyn added. "But it is conditional. Any family member seeking funds must submit a proposal proving that their use of the money contributes to the public good, and the trustee Peyton has the sole discretion to approve or deny it based on ethical standards." Mallory's jaw dropped. "You mean, if I need money, I have to ask her?" "And you have to prove you aren't using it to be awful," Evelyn said with a smile, "which might be a challenge for you, dear." Grant was flipping through the pages, his hands shaking violently. "This is millions of dollars. Evelyn, you are giving control of the entire estate to a girl who earns $50,000 a year. I am giving it to the only person in this room who knows what money is actually for," Evelyn said. "You think money is for keeping score. Peyton knows money is for making change." Grant looked up. His eyes met mine, for the first time. I saw genuine fear in them. He wasn't afraid of being poor. He had his own money. He was afraid of irrelevance. He was afraid because the one lever he had always used to control me, financial superiority, had just been snapped in half. "Why?" Grant whispered. "Why would you do this to me?" "Because you taught her to measure value in money," Evelyn said softly, but with steel underneath. "I taught her to measure it in impact. And tonight, Grant, I am choosing the future. I am betting on the teacher." She turned to me. "It is yours, Peyton. The lawyers are waiting for your signature on the acceptance forms. I looked at the file. I looked at my family. Mallory was crying silently, defeated. Linda was staring at the floor. Grant looked like a man whose kingdom had just dissolved into sand. I walked over to the table. I placed my hand on the file. It felt heavy, but not like a burden. It felt like a tool. I accept, I said. I looked at Grant. I won't cut you off, I said. I am not vindictive, but things are going to be different. If you want to be in my life, you will respect me, you will respect my work, and you will never, ever call me lowly again. If you can't handle that, then the door is right there. Grant looked at me. He opened his mouth to argue, to negotiate, to bully, but he saw the look in my eyes. He saw the emerald dress I was wearing in his mind. He saw the woman on the television screen. He closed his mouth. He looked down. Okay, he whispered. It was the smallest word I had ever heard him say. I turned to Evelyn. Ready to go. Grandma, I think we have a library to plan. I am always ready, Evelyn said, taking my arm. We walked out of the house together. We left them sitting in their expensive living room, surrounded by their expensive things, with the realization that the power had shifted forever. Epilogue. 6 months later. I bought my own place. It is not a mansion in Shaker Heights. It is a loft in the city, with big windows and a wall of bookshelves that requires a ladder to reach the top. It is filled with light and plants and the smell of coffee. The Peyton Hughes Initiative for Education launched last month. We have already funded 4 college scholarships for students from my district. Caleb Monroe sits on the board with me. We review applications on Tuesdays, drinking cheap wine and arguing about essay scores. Mallory is still on leave. She is seeing a therapist. We text occasionally. It is polite. It is distant. But she sent me a card for my birthday last week. It didn't have a check inside. It just had a note that said, "Happy birthday, P." It is a start. Yesterday, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was jagged, unmistakable. It was from my father. I haven't opened it yet. It sits on my kitchen counter, next to a stack of thank you notes from my students. I know it contains an apology. I know it contains an attempt to bridge the gap. I will read it, eventually, but I'm not in a rush. I do not need his apology to feel whole. I do not need his permission to be happy. For the first time in my life, the rhythm of my days belongs entirely to me. Revenge, I have learned, is not about making them suffer. It is not about screaming or fighting or burning their world to the ground. Revenge is simply living a life so bright, so full, and so undeniably yours that they are forced to watch you from the sidelines, realizing that they can no longer touch you. It is the act of taking the pen out of their hands and writing your own ending. And my story is just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this journey with even more people.